Did PewDiePie get it? The red square illusion explained. This week, something quite strange has happened. I don't know if any of you have heard of the YouTuber Pewdiepie. Who am I kidding? He's only one of the world's biggest YouTubers of all time. He currently has, I believe when I last looked, 109 million subscribers. And his latest YouTube was all about TikToks and are they cringy or are they good? And so I go onto this thing and I'm watching these TikToks. Now I'm on TikTok, by the way, getting quite a following on there. So go over and check it out. It's a lot of fun. But suddenly, one of my TikToks popped up and there's PewDiePie reacting to my TikTok. And of course, in his own inimitable style, the one that we all know and love, he gives me a little bit of a roasting. But here's the thing, despite the roasting, I think PewDiePie got it. I think he got it. And I wanted to share with you the clip, show you the moment where I think he gets it, and also share with you the reaction I've had from this particular TikTok on TikTok itself, because lots of the comments have come up, and there are some people who clearly get it, some who don't, and some who have deeply misunderstood what I'm on about. And some of the comments have been hilarious and also flawed. So what is all the fuss about? Before I show you PewDiePie's reaction to the TikTok, let me show you the TikTok itself. Brace yourself. Take a look at this square. What colour is it? What if I told you that it was a red square? You'd likely be a little confused and might even argue, telling me that it isn't red, it's multicoloured. What would you say if I then said, well, I'll prove it to you, and then proceeded to point at only the examples of red spots in the picture? Would that convince you? Of course not. You'd challenge that flawed thinking and point out that I wasn't factoring in all the other colours. But how often do you look back at moments in your life when you felt down or you couldn't cope, and then generalise those moments into a statement about your whole life? For example, only bad stuff happens to me, rather than seeing the huge variety of different experiences, emotions and thoughts that you've inevitably had. So if you're telling stories about yourself that aren't helpful, ask yourself, is this story actually true, or am I only focusing on those moments that feed this story and ignoring the wonderful bright colours that appear in the other places in my life?
Give it away to my fans because I love my fans so much. It's a giveaway.
What color do you see? Okay, there's many colors there,
Take a look at this square. What colour is it? What if I told you that it was a red square? You'd likely be a little confused and might even argue, telling me that it isn't red, it's multicoloured.
It's multicolored.
What would you say if I then said, well, I'll prove it to you, and then proceeded to point at only the examples of red spots in the picture? Would that convince you?
No, it would not convince me. Those are red squares, you dumb bitch. You asked what the color of the square is.
Of course not. You challenge that flawed thinking and point out that I wasn't factoring in all the other colours. I didn't know you'd say no. But how often do you look back at moments in your life when you felt down or you couldn't cope, and then generalise those moments into a statement about your whole life? For example, only bad stuff happens to me, rather look at his than face. seeing the huge variety of different experiences.
Hey, don't turn this into some positive psychology way of thinking. All right, I want to know why the fuck that square is red. That was the point. You don't trick me into some making me feel good about myself and my mental well-being. Get out of here.
Thoughts that you've had. So if you're telling stories about yourself that aren't helpful, ask yourself, is this story actually true? Notice, or am I only focusing on those moments that feed this story and ignoring the wonderful bright colours that appear in the other places in my life?
Get out.
That's him looking like he's getting it. And, yeah, actually, I see where this is going. This is kind of an interesting point. But, of course, he does have a persona to maintain, and people don't come for him to have psychology and therapy. So, of course, he spins it as, come on, and plays for the comedy. But if you look, I believe he got it. And it's been really interesting looking down the comments underneath that video of lots of people who found it useful or thought it was a useful look. And of course, there are some that thought it was cringy and a load of rubbish too. But hey, that's all right. If 109 million subscribers and they're all seeing it and only 1% kind of liked it, that's still 1 million people who may have got some benefit, and I'm okay with those kind of odds. So let me read some of the comments on TikTok that have come out after people have reacted to this and see some of the themes that are coming up. So someone wrote, after seeing that on TikTok, they wrote, well, I thought only good things happened to me until I saw this. So I actually on TikTok went over and created a personal response to that question. Take a look at this.
Now, of course, I think Pug and Hug is poking fun, but I also think there's something interesting to say here. If people are only focusing on good moments and generalizing that your whole life is always good, then you may be setting yourself up for a fall if something difficult or stressful did come up. Recognizing that sometimes going through difficult or stressful situations is a natural part of human life. There's a well-known phrase, when life gives you lemons, you make lemonade. But I don't agree. Being grounded or psychologically free is not best achieved by experiencing the sourness of the lemon and telling people through gritted teeth it's lovely and sweet, but instead to be okay with it being sour, but also keeping in mind it's transitory and the sourness won't last forever. Follow me for more anxiety beating tips and psychological hacks.
Okay, and here's a comment that really stood out for me as well. Someone wrote, simply put, because the good things that happen to me are so little, it's pointless to remember them. Isn't that sad? If it really looks to you like there's only a few of those good moments in your life, I would argue it's not pointless to focus on them or to look at them. It's actually more important to increase your focus on them so that you have a more balanced overview. I think that would make more sense. Someone wrote, like our brains with memories, we can't see all of the colours at once. Our brain cuts corners, put that square far away, and it looks red. I think what they're saying is if there's a predominant amount of red stuff that's happened to you, metaphorically speaking, and you stand back far away, it will look almost all red. But I would argue that even if that were the case from far away and it looked that way, surely the useful thing is to begin to focus and look closer so that you see that it's not actually red. It's multicoloured and there's many more variations. When I'm working therapeutically with people, I often use a metaphor. And this was a metaphor I pinched from Jürgen Rasmussen. He's a very good change worker and thinker. And informally, he's kind of like a mentor of someone that I've worked with for a little while. And you can go over and follow him on YouTube as well for some really deep thinking. And this metaphor he talks about is, imagine I had a red thread and a white thread, and they were intertwined very closely together. It really would look, to all intents and purposes, like it was just one thick pink thread. But if you looked closely, it really wouldn't be. It would just be one red and one white thread bound together. And on seeing that, it wouldn't be fair to say the pink thread vanished. It would be much closer to say that it was never really pink in the first place. So this idea of, if you're struggling and you're panning out and looking at the whole thing and it seems one way, that's why it's important to kind of zoom back in and focus on the variation that has been there. There's this idea as well that metaphor was somehow about moments in your life, and it wasn't necessarily about moments in your life per se. It was really pointing at confirmation bias. And when I first thought about it, to me it was more about the thoughts that come up, that you have certain thoughts that are good and certain thoughts that are bad, and because really it's our thinking that creates experience. So if we're saying, well, I only have bad thoughts, that would create the feeling that everything is bad. But really there's a whole variety of different thoughts and feelings and emotions that appear. So stepping back and seeing the whole picture, if that's helpful, or zooming in so that you see that the thing that looked all red was actually not, it's made up of lots of little colours, is a really useful thing to keep in mind. And people with depression or anxiety or stories about self-worth and they're not good enough, these are useful things to keep in mind. I mean, I will just point this one out, by the way, because, I've got her, which is, someone said, you're handsome. You're handsome. I mean, I don't want to argue, so I won't. One of my favourite comments, by the way, was this one, when they said, but people only ever point out my red squares. Isn't that the most amazing example of what we're talking about? Instead of remembering times where people have pointed them towards good things, they're literally focusing on only the times where people have pointed out the red squares in their life and then telling themselves the story, people only tell me about the red squares. Can't be true. I would invite people like that to look more closely and open up to the possibility that they may be generalizing. Oh, this was a cool one. Watch this. Squinting, it seems to average a bluish teal. I like that one, and here's why. Because in order for them to make it look a certain way, for them to make it look a bluish teal, they're admitting that they have to actually be applying a certain level of focus. I have to squint in a particular way, and I have to look at it in a particular way. And isn't that cool? It's like, yeah, I can make it look any which way I want, but I really have to apply myself to doing that. It's kind of like what people are doing when they say, like, only bad shit happens to me. There is a process of something they're doing in order to have that result, especially when the square is multicolored. And of course, you've got some people in the comments who totally misunderstood, or just, quite frankly, I don't know what they were thinking. So someone writes, "This could be dangerous. If people ignore their abuse, I feel weird about this." And I'm thinking, where on earth did I suggest in that people should ignore their abuse? Beats me. What if there are people who have more bad stuff happening to them than others, so their squares are more red than others? Again, this is why it's so important to begin to not tell yourself the story that the whole thing is red. There is variation, and the more you look for it, the more you'll tend to find it. Oh, well, we've got one here. I think it ignores something important, and it's too big to put it in a TikTok. So it would be taboo to try convince people on TikTok that it doesn't exist. My only response to that is, what? Someone wrote, I have depression that makes my life bad, so I might not be the target audience. No. Why would that be true? Aren't you the exact target audience? You're someone that likely is very absorbed in some story of I'm not good enough or nothing good happens to me, and really stepping back or going closer as you need to see that it's multicolored, it's fully varied, will balance out thinking. And this is not about doing positive thinking, by the way, and only focusing on the green stuff. That's just as problematic. If you falsely tell yourself, everything's great, and it's not, that's not what we're suggesting. But it's to have a step back and realize it's all just part and parcel of the whole thing. No, it's not one colour. It is varied. By the way, I'm quite opinionated about things like being overly positive. And if you want more of my thoughts about that, click on the link above and you'll get the YouTube I did on toxic positivity, the downside to being too positive. And I liked this message. He said, I honestly think about those people who truly feel like their whole life is negative. Like, fucking seriously. Keep looking, man. Keep looking. If you feel like you're struggling or you have this nothing good happens to you, keep looking. There is variation. This is not a very good analogy. One good thing brings you up, one bad thing brings you down. If more bad things and traumatic experiences are at hand, then they're going to outweigh the few good moments. That's why people say this. Of course, you've got to look at the spread of stuff. But the idea of saying that, one good thing brings you up, but then a bad thing brings you down. Well, could you not reverse that? One bad thing brings me down, but then another good thing picks me up. Again, it's just a filter of focus that you choose to be living by. If you're worried that you do this, it's a totally normal response. Your brain is programmed to focus more on the bad things for survival. And then you couple this with someone who writes, "Hey, philosopher," that's me, "the brain just thinks more negative. That's just a fact." Okay, all right. So let's just break this one down for a second. Does the brain just think more negative? Is it that we're primed to look for more negative experiences? Here's my take on it. We are essentially survival-oriented mechanisms. We are looking to survive. So from a very early age, we are looking for what's dangerous and what's safe. Bottom line, if something is a threat or it's dangerous or could hurt us in some way, we're likely to mark it out as such and go, this is dangerous, this is a problem. This is a threat. I need to have this on my radar, as it were. So that's fine, that's well and good. But here's what happens. Sometimes people jump to the conclusion that something's bad and misattribute the fear, right? So something gets coded as bad, but it's not really bad. But if they mark it out that way, it will seem that way. And here's what happens. Something that gets marked out on the radar as bad, you're more likely to pay attention to it, and then you begin to tell yourself the whole thing is bad. Now, by the way, I'd like to thank one of my new subscribers on the YouTube channel especially. He felt that my style maybe made him feel like he was back in the classroom, and I really don't know why that would be the case. I don't think I would ever give anyone any cause for thinking that. Now, you might be wondering, what is it that all this is really about? How does the brain manifest this? It's all to do with the reticular activating system. Make a note of that. It's just a bundle of nerves at the brainstem, which filters out the stuff that isn't important and makes you focus on the stuff that is. Essentially, what you focus on, your brain thinks is more important, but it doesn't mean that's the only experience that you're having. I remember having a personal experience of this where I went and bought a new car, drive out the dealership, suddenly I'm seeing it looks like everyone's got the same car as me. Like they suddenly appeared on the road. How did that happen? And that phenomena is confirmation bias. We get it in our head that something's happening, and then we look only for those examples of it. So this is like the phobic flyers that I've worked with, who will say things to me like, every time I turn on the TV, it's always air crash investigation, right? Why? It's a protective mechanism. This is why it's important to counteract that story. And to question, is the thing that I'm marking out as terrible actually a threat, actually terrible? For example, is the thought I'm worthless actually dangerous or bad or a threat? Well, let me try. Let me think I'm worthless. Right? I just pictured me being worthless. I just said to myself, I'm worthless. No, nothing happened to me. Nothing terrible occurred. So it can't be that the thought itself is dangerous. It's the meaning people attribute to that thought. So if someone looks at the thought, I'm worthless, and they go, this one's me, I mustn't think it, that essentially marks it out as dangerous, as threatening, and now it's going to really look like they're going to pay more attention to when those thoughts appear. And it will look like that to them. But it doesn't mean that's actually true. It's still just one passing red dot amongst a variety of other thoughts. And a really great example of that in action is when I was on an anxiety and depression forum, and someone posted this question: what should I do when my depression brings up the thought, I'm worthless and life is shit? And I was mesmerized by the comments that people were posting things like, don't worry, hun, you'll be okay. And cheer up, you'll be all right, you're worth something, everything's fine. And some others going, I'll pray for you. All right. I popped up. I'm not normally a keyboard warrior in that way, but I couldn't help myself. I had to. I was compelled to. I went on the keyboard and said, different question for you. What should you do when your happiness brings up the thought, I'm wonderful and life is great? And she wrote back, tagging me. It was a sarcastic tag, you could tell from the way she'd tagged me. Well, Howard, don't be ridiculous. Those ones are just thoughts. Isn't that cool? In other words, like has some thoughts that appear and she goes, oh, this I'm worthless thought, that's me. And then another thought appears like I'm okay. And she just goes, no, that one's just a thought. They're all thought. Now, the goal is here, along with the red square analogy, as it were, is not to go, oh, we're just going to believe this is true. It's to step back and see it's all just a variety of stuff that comes in and comes out. And it really wouldn't be true to mark any of them out as particularly dangerous because they are all just thoughts. The other fun thing about this TikTok, by the way, is just a variety of different responses. And I put a TikTok together about my reflections on the vast array of different responses. Take a look at this.
I came on TikTok to be entertained, not attacked. That's what someone commented under the video where I showed a multicoloured square and pointed out that if you just focus on the red spots, it would be flawed to say that the whole square were red, and went on to suggest that sometimes people do that in their own lives where we say only bad stuff happens to me and we're not factoring all the other things. And currently that video has had over 500 shares, lots of comments, thousands of likes, but I've been mesmerised by the wide range of comments. From thanks, this is amazing, I needed that, to if you look at the square with your eyes kind of closed, it actually looks grey. All the way to it's a political statement, or it's a statement about the male patriarchy. The interesting thing for me though is that the video is the same video for everyone. So the message that you're hearing can't be coming from the video. The message people are hearing is their perception of the message. That's different. Remember, your reality is not coming from out there, it's being created by the meaning you attach to it all.
So do I think PewDiePie got it? Yes, I do. Do I think a lot of the people, a lot of the 109 million subscribers he got it? Yes, I do. By the way, if unpacking this and taking you through this, if you enjoyed it, if you found value, then please share it, like it, or drop a comment below, subscribe, hit the bell, all of that usual stuff. That would be fantastic. And it'd be great to have you on this journey with me. I'll be honest, I think PewDiePie got it. Hope you enjoyed.